How can all the people in a city wear black? And why should they do that? Hi, I'm Sara. I talk about my country on this channel, Iran, Iranian culture, Persian literature, and all the mysterious things that you probably never heard. If you like this kind of content, subscribe to my channel and let's get started. My story today comes from Nezami Ganjavi, a poet and story writer from the 12th century. He has written the most famous Persian romances as poem and story. Poetic and rhythmic stories. One of his most important works is HaftPeykar. It can be translated as 7 bodies, 7 portraits, 7 princesses. I don't know, there are just 7 women in the story who guide our prince to grow, mature, and finally marry them all. The story is about Bahram, a prince raised in the lap of luxury. He's had a lot of adventures before this, but HaftPeykar, the story of HaftPeykar, starts from here. One day he was walking in the castle his stepfather had built for him when he came upon a mysterious room with a closed door. The servants opened the door for him and he saw 7 charming girls painted on the wall. The inscription on the wall read, "The heavens want you to marry these 7 girls." Good, because he had already fallen in love with them. When he became king, he found those 7 princesses from all around the world and brought them to Iran. He built a castle with 7 domes, each dedicated to a day of the week and supervised by a planet. Domes have a long story in Iran. They represent a connection between earth and sky, or in another word, between body and spirit. Each dome shows a color according to the angel of sunlight. In this book, each night of the week, one of the women tells a story for Bahram. And we see the intellectual evolution of Bahram through 7 nights, 7 stories under 7 domes, and through 7 women. And you should also know that in the Persian calendar, the week starts with Saturday or Shanbeh. So the week starts on Saturday or Saturn Day. The day is supervised by Saturn, and the color is black. Yeah, I know Saturn is not black, but maybe it had been at that time. سوی گنبد سرای قالی فام پیش بانوی هند شد به سلام تا شب آنجا نشاط و بازی کرد عود سوزی و عطر سازی کرد شاه از آن نوبهار کشمیری خواست بویی چو باد شبگیری آهوی ترک چشم هندوزاد نافه مشک را گره بگشاد. So on Saturday, Bahram went to the Indian prince, Furak. They spent the whole day together, and at night, Bahram asked her a story. The girl began like this. One of my relatives once told me this story, that when I was a kid, one of the servants of our palace was an ascetic woman who always wore black. She didn't like to explain when we asked, but she was an honest woman and she didn't want to lie to us. So she finally said, I was once a maiden to a very noble and hospitable king who always wore black. People knew that he wasn't like this before, but an event in his life had changed him forever. No one ever dared to ask about it until I did. The king refused to answer at first, but I persisted and asked again and again until he couldn't resist. He said, everyone knows that my palace has always welcomed guests and strangers. Several years ago, a man came to my palace who was dressed in black from head to toe. Everyone was curious about how he looked, but he wouldn't answer any of the questions. When I asked him, he finally gave me a clue and left. Yeah, he drove the man crazy, the hospitable king. گفت شهری است در ولایت چین. شهری آراسته چو خلد برین. مردمانی همه به صورت ماه، همه چون ماه در پرند سیاه. نام آن شهر شهر مدهوشان، تعزیتنامه سیاه پوشان. هر که آن شهر باده نوش کند، آن سوادش سیاه پوش کند. So the only thing the man said was that there's a city in China where everyone wore black. So curious was the king that he decided to leave for China. Okay, it's not that big a deal. There must be someone to run the country for a few years. The king's curiosity is more important. The king wandered around the city during the first year there without anyone helping him find his answer, until he met a butcher who looked like a very nice man. He invited the butcher to dinner and became his friend. But when the king gave him some expensive gifts, the butcher suspected and said, "Why are you doing this? Are you wanting something from me?" The king said, "Yes. Why do you all wear black?" مرد قصاب کین سخن بشنید گوسفندی شد و ز گرگ رمید گفت پرسیدی آنچه نیست ثواب دهمت آنچنان که هست جواب. After midnight, the butcher said, "If you're still looking for an answer, this is the time." Suspension! We've gone this far and the main story hasn't still begun. The butcher took the king to the ruins and asked him to sit in a basket that was there. The king sat there and, a little scared, looked at the butcher, who said something, and suddenly the basket turned to a bird and flew into the air. The king stayed in the air for a while. Hard strings were wrapped around his neck. He could do nothing to rescue himself. He couldn't come back. He couldn't go forward until suddenly a mountain-sized bird arrived. The bird might be able to save him, so he grabbed the bird by the leg and suddenly he felt light as a feather. The bird took him to another world. چون از آن ماندگی برآسودم شکر کردم که بهترک بودم. باز کردم نظر به عادت خیش دیدم آن جایگاه را پس و پیش 100,000 گل شکفته در او سبزه بیدار و آب خفته در او. Am I in heaven? He could not believe what he was seeing. It was a stunning garden in front of him with fairies all around. Torktaz, the queen of fairies, noticed that there was an earthly creature here. She ordered to bring him in. When the king saw Torktaz, he couldn't say anything. She wasn't just beautiful, she was the beauty. She was something more than a human. He bowed and kissed the soil of her throne. Torktaz said, "You're a dear guest for us. Don't stay there. Come here, sit next to me." The king said, "No, you're the queen of fairies and I'm just a human and..." Okay. While enjoying the music of fairies, he ate some heaven food and drank and got drunk. The night came. The delighted king was dreaming about the fairy, so he asked Torktaz for a kiss. She gave him 1,000 kisses, but then said, "It's just that. Don't ask for more than kisses for tonight." The king spent the night with other fairies for 29 nights, but the thought of Torktaz wouldn't leave him. On the 30th night, he finally lost his patience. He went to the fairy and said, "I can no longer wait. I want you tonight. دل و جانی و هوش و بینایی بی تو چون باشدم شکیبایی." The fairy said, "Wait for another night." But the king couldn't. He suddenly got out of control and embraced Torktaz. The fairy said, "Okay, if it's so, just close your eyes for a moment. I'll uncover myself and then I'll be yours." The king blinked and he found himself in the basket again. هیچ کس گرد من نه از زن و مرد مونسم آه گرم و بادی سرد. The butcher was waiting for him. He said, "If I would tell you the story 1,000 times, you wouldn't believe it until you saw." The king returned home with a lot of regret and grief and wore black forever. The maid was also impressed by the story, followed his king. So this way, our first lady finished her story and said, "در سیاهی شکوه دارد ماه چتر سلطان از آن کنند سیاه به سیاهی بسر جهان بیند چرگنی بر سیاه ننشیند هفت رنگ است زیر هفت و رنگ نیست بالاتر از سیاهی رنگ. So the journey of Bahram started with black. We'll see how it'll end. So don't forget to subscribe if you want to know the story of Sunday.